We're quickly moving towards a world in which a $1,000 console will be the norm and console gaming will become a luxury expenditure. I absolutely hate that things are going in this direction, but it seems that they are. And those are the words of Professor Joost van Drooyen to Games Radar as he reacted to PlayStation's latest price hike and looks towards the future. Which is pretty much his job, and the future's not looking great. Economic and political upheaval are wreaking havoc in the games industry, and the long-term costs could be dire, as what was once the easiest entry point into gaming for millions of people is soon becoming the preserve of the most well-off in society. That is bad for video games. And with that said, let's get into the story. For the second time in under a year, and the third since the console launched, PlayStation have announced global price increases for their hardware. I'll use the US prices as a baseline because they've broadly been mapped onto the rest of the world. So the base PS5 is up from $550 to $650, the digital edition from $500 to $600, and even the poor little Portal has climbed up from $200 to $250. But where it's most rough is the Pro, because it's moving from $750 to $900, and it's all kicking off April 2nd. So you can bet there'll be a surge of sales before then. So what we're looking at across the board is $100 more for base consoles and $150 for the Pro. Of course, local taxes and currency conversions will push that even higher for other regions in the world. Now, notably, this won't touch the cheaper digital-only Japanese language locked PS5 that is sold domestically, which means it'll be around half the price of the international models. So if you're planning a trip to Japan and you're okay with only playing Japanese games, I guess that's a thing. But the reason all this is happening is a hell of a lot bigger than imports. It's about costs, and they're goddamn brutal. Sony's explanation really won't surprise you. They say, with continued pressures in the global economic landscape, we've made the decision to increase the prices of PS5, PS5 Pro, and PlayStation Portal Remote Player globally. Oh, that was a mouthful. Now, what's telling about this increase is that it's happening everywhere. You see, back in 2022, PlayStation didn't risk hiking prices in the US, though they did hike them everywhere else. But now there is no option not to. And it's not hard to see why. The economic headwinds are going in the wrong direction for Sony's margins. And for a bit of evidence, that same week, Sony suspended sales of almost all of their memory cards. And when they did, they blamed the semiconductor shortage driven by the data center crisis. And in the US, Sony weren't the only ones raising prices that week. GameFile reported that the next Playground, which is the family-friendly Kinect analog console, that they had to raise prices by $50 up to $300. And that's in spite of them outselling Xbox and PlayStation hardware at a few points last year. It's not just them, though. Ioneo have suspended sales of the next two handheld PC because production costs now approach double their original price. That's insane. So production costs are going up across the board, and companies, well, they want you and me to cover the difference. Now, on top of that, tariffs are still a bit of an issue in the US. Now, they were lessened after the Supreme Court ruling on their legality, but worry there is not gone. So with what I'm going to call a multi-front global shit show going on, well, it turns out that even before all this news broke, PlayStation were looking to the future and thinking about what their next hardware could be. And I think that is quite telling. Why are they doing this now? Well, at their last financial report, CFO Lin Tao said that, quote, conditions in the console hardware market during the year-end selling season were more challenging than expected, but they were actually still able to hit their targets for sales. But their outlook in the future is more mixed. Now, of course, on the channel we've talked before about how they had planned to increase growth by, to quote them, prioritizing monetization of the installed base to date and striving to further expand their software and network services revenue. Bit of a mouthful of a quote, but what it basically amounted to is, oh shit, we need to get more money from the people that we've already got because we sure as hell are not getting more new people as fast as we thought we would. Now, the reason that they could do that is, to quote them, given the stage of our console cycle, our hardware sales strategy can be adjusted flexibly. That's kind of telling, and we can now see what that actually looks like. And notably, they have raised the base model to the same price as the Xbox Series X after its own increases last year. So that means that they're not breaching any new limit for a console of that tier. And there is some logic to the increase. In an interview with Games Radar, analyst Dr. Serkan Toto suggested that Sony was actually getting ahead of staggered price increases. Here's the quote from him. "It looks like Sony baked in potential future fluctuations and decided to go for one substantial increase in early 2026 instead of raising prices more frequently and over a longer period of time." And that last part is important, because it means PlayStation still thinks there's a long enough life to the PS5. And given the global situation, I think that is beyond obvious. There is no time soon that's going to be good for launching a fresh console. Now, at that November earnings call, Tao said that the PS5 was, quote, only in the middle of the journey, and that suggests a lifespan that could run into 2028 or perhaps later. Of course, if you do a new price increase every 3 months, people are just going to get really down on you. That's just going to be bad. You generally want to take all your PR just all at once up front and get it done and over with. But there's another thing. This year is almost certainly going to be the pinnacle of PS5 console sales, at least post-launch. And there's a very simple reason why. It's called Grand Theft Auto 6. And when GTA 6 comes out, there will be no PC port, no PS4, no Xbox One version. Video games sell consoles more than spec sheets do, and if you want an example of that, just take a look at Pokemon Pocopia, which it's maybe 152% more Switch 2 sales or something like that. The stats only just came out, but the point is, big system sellers like that truly do matter. That means Sony are increasing prices now so that when we get to November, they'll be able to benefit from people buying consoles to upgrade from their PS4 so that they can play GTA 6. And that's been one of the big stories of this console cycle. Loads of people have just stayed in PS4 and PS4 Pro. They've not bothered to move on, or they've just went somewhere else, be that PC or, I don't know, gooning and TikToking on their phone and not playing video games anymore. But what it does mean is that this is one of Sony's biggest opportunities. And of course, with Team Xbox not having a pro-level console, well, it does mean that if you want to play probably the most technically impressive, largest scope game that's ever been made at its level of fidelity, and you really want it pushed to the max, and in a world where you can't play it in PC, oh, it'll be the PS5 Pro, which has just went up by $150. And what it also does is it lets them sell at this higher markup, meaning that whenever they do discounts, well, those discounts won't sting their bottom line as much. It's basically a similar argument to game prices going to $80, where some people will buy a game for $80 regardless, and anyone waiting for a discount will probably just end up paying close enough to an older sticker price because your discount is applied to a higher base value. Either way, more money for Sony, more people in the PlayStation ecosystem. That is, of course, as long as this gamble actually pays off. And that's where there are some worries. There's a world where this could backfire, and it's because PlayStation is banking on one thing: their audience continuing to have money. Now, the data actually does back them up on that, but to a point. So think of it this way. There are effectively 3 video game markets. There's the big free-to-play audience, so Fortnite and all those other games you don't have to pay to access. Then there's the annualized live service crowd. That's your EA Sports FC, your NBA 2Ks, and a lot of Sony first-party games that slot into that type of purchase going out to a very broad market. What may give you the willies is that together, those two extremes make up what Newzoo identifies as 70% of the market, which is the full price $70 games. Those people actually do turn up and buy them. The other 30% though, that is the squeezed middle of AA's, indies, and other projects. So, PlayStation's audience have been proving to be willing to spend, but the very same economic chaos that PlayStation is blaming for these price rises does mean there is an ever-dwindling number of people who can actually spend on a PS5, especially, say, a Pro. And when Sony says the PS5 Pro is the best way to play GTA 6, that's going to mean it'll be $900. You'll then need to buy that game. Let's assume it'll be $70. Maybe it'll be more. Maybe you'll actually want to get the $100 version because it comes with some things that are technically worth something. And that effectively means a $1,000 USD investment to play the big new game in the best way you can on a console. PlayStation basically hopes that the FOMO of GTA will drive more units, but with these prices, that is an extremely high barrier to entry. And it's going to mean that soon the potential audience will shrink to the more wealthy who can actually afford these prices. I think that's a bad thing. I actually like it when video games can basically be for everyone. Brings us together, that's the type of shit we want. With all this in mind, what's coming next? The console was always supposed to be the plug-and-play, easy-access version of gaming, and us weird PC people would build our tricked-out rigs and spend a shitload of money on stuff that we technically don't need but we like because it's our hobby. And to some extent, that still does exist. There are relatively cheap consoles, like say the Next Playground. That's clearly got an audience for families at that $250 price point. Of course, you're not going to be playing GTA in that thing, but it still is a console that has performed real well. But even that budget console is now only $100 cheaper than the PS5 Digital Edition whenever it launched. So what we are seeing is the floor is rising. Not everyone will be able to make that leap. Many won't want to. You know, those free-to-play games that are available on phones, tablets, PCs. Well, you can just play it in those things instead of a single-function console. The players of those games don't really need PS5s. And as a lot of analysts speculate, there's a really big question looming, and that is what happens in the next generation of consoles. Gaming has never really been a cheap hobby. A PS5 at $500 is just as inaccessible as a PS5 at $650 to many people. But there was a principle that consoles would get cheaper over time, and that their value would actually increase over time as devs got more out of them, and the actual games got discounted, and the libraries got larger. That is always how it was. I mean, do you remember what, say, Black Friday PS4 sales would be like? They would be so cheap in comparison to what we've got today. And I can't say for the earlier console generations, at least in living memory, I think this is the first time that a generation has got substantially more expensive over time instead of getting cheaper over time, which is really what should happen. But where it gets spooky is that over time, it means that gaming could become something for, say, middle class and up, that fewer and fewer people will be able to access this type of gaming. I think that is bad, actually, for games. And what could potentially be worse is what will replace it for the people who, say, can't afford those things. What if it ends up being more free-to-plays that are a little bit psychologically manipulative? What if it is that instead of people enjoying, say, a 50-hour story or getting really immersed in a cool game that just resonates with their soul, well, what if instead they're just bed-rotting on TikTok because that is the form of dopamine release, you know, chill-out time, whatever, that they're actually able to access? That actually worries me. It's a little bit spine-chilling. And with Nvidia probably throwing everything they can at Vera Rubin and the AI-focused data center stuff, it's not like PC gaming is getting a lot of love to compensate. We're looking at PS5s that are more expensive and the potential of a PS6 that could start at $1,000. Prices are going up, spending power is going down, PlayStation is betting that you will pay anyway. I guess we, and CFO Lin Tao, will just have to wait and see how that goes. But what you don't have to wait for is our good friend Jensen Huang making a little bit of a prat out of himself over DLSS 5. You can learn all about that in this video next.